I'm just talking and I'm on mute. Okay, I am talking and I am on mute. Um, welcome. I'm TJ Randolph, and welcome to Mosaic with TJ Randolph. We have a very exciting show today, not just because it's my fruit, Danny Jordan, but we also have my mom who has decided to join us, Miss Shirley. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring them to the platform so we can get this thing started. Hello.
Hello.
So, this is to my viewers that are watching. This is my mom, Miss Shirley. You see her on the platform. So I'm going to get to the announcements as I normally do. Shout out to all the hardworking truckers that are on the highways and the byways, bringing us our goods and services. Shout out to my firstborn nephew, Ryan Spunk Adams, who's on the horn and the intro. And again, I thank Micki-Redd Creates, who put together that intro and also all of the digital marketing. So, what we're going to talk about today is colorism. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because, in as much as it's been on these YouTube streets and social media, this is not a new thing. This is not a new thing at all. And I was talking to my mom about it, and I was asking her, does she remember any of the issues of colorism growing up? And she did. So we're going to talk about it. But before we do, I want to show a video just to get started. Just a real quick snippet. Let me share my screen with you. And welcome to those who are in the chat. Share screen. Screen. For those of you that are under 30, or actually 35 and under, you may not recognize this. This is from School Daze. And we're just going to look at the first part of it and then talk about it. Okay.
The word is excuse me.
Nobody told you to stand in the hall either. Excuse me.
That's better, Miss Thing.
It's not real.
Say what?
You heard.
It ain't even real.
You wish you had hair like this.
Girl, you know you weren't even born with blue eyes.
That's right. Blue contact lenses.
They're just jealous.
Right.
Jealous.
Rachel, I've been watching you look at Julian. You're not slick.
If that was true, he wasn't much to look at.
Tell me, Rachel.
Kiss the Minnie. Barbie doll. Hi, yellow heifer.
Tar baby. Wanna be white, chickaboo.
Don't start.
We're gonna finish it.
Okay. Thoughts. Mommy, do you remember this movie?
I remember the movie, but it was set in a time that was more in line with your generation.
So since we're talking about colorism, I wanted to talk about that based on just share your experience for what you remember.
What I remember growing up in Los Angeles during a time that when I started school, our neighborhoods were integrated. So we started elementary school with whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, whoever lived in the neighborhood. There was no busing back then in LA. So you went to whatever school was in your neighborhood. So our schools were interracially mixed. And I don't remember as a child experiencing that level of colorism. But we did have the mindset. I don't know if it was conscious or subconscious, but we did have the mindset that the lighter skinned girls were prettier. Now, I didn't realize that I was even considered light skinned till I was in my 50s, because color was never an issue in my family or even in my neighborhood. So even though we knew, it was just kind of a mindset that the lighter the skin, the prettier you were. It wasn't as overt as what is depicted in that movie.
So when you had the mindset, what do you think the mindset? I mean, I can speculate, but
Well,
where did the mindset come from?
the mindset came from primarily because most of the visuals we would see in media, television, magazines, billboards, or whatever, uh, if it showed a black person at all, if they were of a darker complexion, it showed them as being buffoonery
Mm,
or overly exaggerated features like the big red lips and the eyes that were bucked out, and it just didn't show them in a complimentary way. So most of what we had to look at to admire, so to speak, would either be white people or very light complexioned colored people, as we were called back then, colored.
mhm.
So that's where the subconsciousness, I believe, emanated from. The images that we saw were primarily of lighter skinned people or white people.
So what? So with that, why do you think it continues to be an issue now? Because again, we are we've always been a diverse people, a diverse spectrum of colors in our race. Why do you think it continues to be a problem? Because you see this movie, and by the way, I didn't do my disclaimer. The videos snippets that I'm using, and also any references to any media is for fair use commentary, and I put the links for you to view in its entirety in the description. But why do you think it continues to permeate now? Because this movie was from 1988, and here as of late, and I guess, well, not as of late, it's really been a serious argument, or debate, if you will, about colorism within our race, within our people.
Now, what was the question again?
Why do you think it continues to be a problem now? Because we have more diverse images in the media, in movies, in magazines. Why do you think it continues to be such an issue even now?
Well, if you don't address, the history of behind that, history is going to always be doomed to repeat itself. There was a time in our history that some people that was considered an advantage at the time to be a lighter complexion, they got better opportunities. And in some cases, they would pass for white. Now, you know, the way we think today, that would be considered an absolute, negative character trait to pass for white. But if you know anything about our history in this country, uh, it can also be considered a way to save your life back then. Uh, because there's some things, as a people, we can't hide the fact by our complexions that we are black people. But if you were lighter skinned, you could kind of pass through society with not as much intimidation as those with apparently darker skin. So it starts back then, and it really starts even before then, how we even acquired the lighter complexions uh, in our African uh, lineage. So there's so many different avenues to incorporate into that thinking, that to just settle on one reason, it wouldn't cover it.
Now, Mama, you said that you didn't even know that you were considered light skinned until you were in your 50s. So, given that, do you think that you were treated differently because you thought that you were darker skinned, or did you notice a difference?
Well, it's just it's so many different ladders to light skin, because some people, we had the high yellow, then we had
The red bone, yeah.
the red bone, and I guess I fall more into the red bone category. But in my immediate family, I was the lighter complexioned of my siblings. But that was never an issue in our family, because we had cousins who had the really light skin and the green eyes and such. But that was never an issue with us as a family. We never even focused on that. So for me to say that I didn't even know I was considered light skinned, it was only when I started traveling, excuse me, to some of the Caribbean countries, that the little children over there were calling me white. And I said, "What do you mean?" They thought I was white, because
Mm,
I guess there's a certain level of light skinnedness, that if you're over that level, that you're just considered white over there. And that's what they were calling me. So I started trying to examine that. But up until then, I never even considered color
mhm.
among Black people to be a thing.
Well, and I'm gonna get Danielle on this, and also shout out to Ace Butterfly, because Ace Butterfly was the one that sent this suggestion to my email with respect to me being, I guess, lighter complexion and um, raising Danielle, who is darker than me, if I ever saw any difference or if she ever experienced any differences. So, Danielle, if are you listening?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have any experience, or do you feel that you experienced any challenges or difficulties or any questions about, you know, your skin color as opposed to being as my skin color being that I was your mom? Did you ever notice anything? Did you ever experience anything?
Honestly, no. Because I didn't think you were that much lighter than me, I guess. I mean, you're lighter, but it's not like with me and my daughter. Like she's drastically lighter than me. I'm not that much darker than you, so I didn't notice it too much.
Mhm.
Only time my color ever was an issue for me growing up is when you moved me to the South for the first time. That's when I
That,
really noticed that I was Black.
that
Because
you mean darker skin? You mean
just
or
in general, like I wasn't Black enough for the Black people, but I was too Black for the white people. Versus in California, the way I grew up, none of that really mattered. They just cared, like, oh, you're a nice person, oh, you like Barbies, okay, let's play. Versus when I moved to
Yeah.
Tennessee, it was
Mhm.
like, oh, why do you talk like a white girl? Why don't you have no, slang about you? Why do you dress like that? And then the white people are like, oh, we don't hang out with your kind. So I
mm,
literally was just ostracized when I was in like
Right.
elementary school, because the way I grew up in California, that was normal. But in Tennessee, it wasn't. So that's the only time I noticed anything with colorism was there,
Right.
because like basically me being looking as though I look white or act white, I
mm.
was more so bullied, if I had to say, by my own people than I was even with the white people. Like I said, they just didn't talk to me, but the Black people would just like roast me and just like laugh at me in my face. Like,
I
so,
think,
yeah,
as I started out saying, that I grew up in Los Angeles. Of course, that was several decades before you were born. I'm talking about in the 50s and in the 60s. We just didn't give that type of thing. We had more important issues to deal with.
exactly.
We had civil rights, of course. in Los Angeles, we didn't have the overt discrimination as they did in the South. But there was discrimination, even though we didn't, as children, we didn't recognize it, but our parents did, because
Mm-hmm.
our parents came from the South during the Great Migration. Me and my siblings and first cousins, we were first generation born in Los Angeles in our family. So the issues of color, like Danielle is saying, it just wasn't an issue that I really paid any attention to, as she said, until I moved further south.
You know, you make a good point because shout out to What the Funk. He wrote here, School Daze is a classic, and it used to be AKA was considered light skin, and deltas were considered dark skin. And that is true. I remember when I went to the University of Oklahoma, because I will say, you know, I'm a lot darker skinned now than I was in my youth, and even, you know, when I was in college. And I remember them would come up telling me, you should be an AKA. I'm like, what does that mean? Because I was light skinned, and the darker skin uh ladies or young women were considered, well, you look like you should be a delta. So again, and that was in the 80s and into the 90s. And I have a picture here of my grandfather, and I put Joseph Jones's legacy, because you can see now. I showed my nephew, because you all have seen Spunk Adams on my video. So these are pictures of him and Danielle when they were little, and you can see the various shades of in our own family, the
Mm-hmm.
blue eyes. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so again, it's something that we never really thought about. Actually, I never even thought about it much myself. But here's the thing my mother talked about, I think is very poignant. Right now, what is happening in these social media streets, and you talked about the caricatures of Black people that were seen, you know, the big lips, the bulging eyes, et cetera, et cetera. What is happening now is that many people, I'll just say in general, men in general, particularly Black men, there are certain stereotypes that are now being associated with darker women. What am I talking about? They're saying that the darker women are more ratchet, more ghetto, more outspoken. So now all the negative connotations, even though we don't have the issue of not being represented in media and entertainment, but what we also have now are the stereotypes that are being associated with darker skinned women. What are your thoughts about that? Either one of you.
First of all, who are they?
In social media,
Okay, well,
many content creators, even like I have a YouTube channel. There are a lot of people in these spaces that have YouTube channels, and again, they are commenting on. I'll just give you an example. There was a incident on one of the podcasts a couple of days ago where a Black woman got into a verbal argument with a man on the podcast. Both of them Black. The woman ended up getting to a physical altercation with the man, and she's darker skinned. So now many people are commenting on her behavior, and that's just one example. Now the behavior is the behavior, but people, particularly men, a lot of men are associating those kinds of behaviors with darker complexioned women.
Well, I mean, with that, I look at it from the different side of that, where because I didn't notice the colorism thing really for darker skinned women and men until I got into college. Because, my world, when you grow up, it's all about you and what you need to do. And there was never an issue of dating for me. There was never an issue of opportunities for me. There was never those kinds of issues because I was of a technically lighter skin tone. So when I came to college and I met darker skinned women and hearing their background, I was like, what? You dealt with that? Because it's something in my life, it just never happened. Like hearing darker skinned women never dating, never having a boyfriend. I'm like, that's a thing. Meanwhile, I've had several. And it's not just one dark skinned woman. I've heard it from several different ones. So it's like I feel like the world, because of like even what Mama said, they paint darker skinned women in like not the most pretty light. I mean, there's movies, I'm sure, if you see a lighter skinned woman, she's in a more submissive, kind-hearted, caring role, but you have the dark-skinned woman playing in the media as the aggressor, the the single mom who got to deal with all these kids and she dark and she aggressive, or she in jail. It's like usually if it's those rough, very aggressive roles more often than not. Maybe not now, but before that, you saw played by darker skinned women. So there's been this media portrayal of dark skinned women not being the chosen mate, being the backbone of the family, and not in the good way.
Well, and
Versus,
before you answer to that point, you're absolutely right, because there have been in lately in not only social media but in mainstream media, there have been black men who have said they don't, and mind you, they dark. I don't want to date a dark skinned woman.
well, yeah, they want light skinned babies. I mean, and it's not all their fault. It's just what's portrayed. I mean, look at my husband. Kevon is clearly a lot darker than me, but
No, it's not their fault. It's the conditioning that we have had to deal with for generations back.
yeah.
I was just reading a scripture this morning out of Proverbs. It says not to choose any of the oppressor's ways. But that's exactly what we did as a people. And the fact of the matter is, our oppressors were white, and they chose to follow the ways of the oppressor. So white looked more attractive. There was a time that, our black men, my father included, he chose lighter skinned women. That's just the facts. And he was a very dark skinned man. And at one time, we just used the excuse, opposites attract. But as far as the black female is concerned, we run the spectrum of skin tones.
Mm-hmm.
So if you what you're looking for is a lighter complexion, we got that. But it got to a point where that wasn't even enough.
Mm-hmm.
You went all the way over to white, but that was being envious of the oppressor and choosing their ways because their ways look more attractive.
Yeah, very true. And doesn't help. Again, it's no shade to them in the intention, but if you're a man, right, and you grow up, I'm not saying obviously LeBron James has a black wife, but like let's just say as an example, you grow up and LeBron James' wife is white, and all the people you emulate, their wives are white. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to naturally think, oh yeah, I'm gonna pick a black woman, because you
Mm-hmm.
associate success being a black man by marrying a white woman.
And
That's
beauty. Don't forget beauty.
exactly. So it's like but versus the media and the things you see in social media, all the people who are with black women, yeah, are y'all even successful? Or if it is a black man with a black woman, she's of lighter skin. So it's always, you don't see very dark skinned people together associated with success. Someone's always lighter in the relationship. Like it's very rare that I see two dark skinned people together. Like
Not that it's not happening, but the images
exactly.
is what's so brainwashing. It's the images that we have before us, and that goes way back. Like I started out saying when I first came on, that for a long time, that's all the images that we saw. We saw a black image. It was someone like Lena Horne or Josephine Baker, or any of the women in that category that they could have passed for white if they chose to.
Yeah, that's what Ace Butterfly, he said. I see many of old black Hollywood as biracial looking versus darker skinned lead actors, e.g., Dorothy Dandridge, Lena Horne, kind of like what you were just saying.
Well, I can't see all that at the same time. Let's see.
Okay. Real quick, Ace Butterfly is also asking for you, Mom. Did the color of skin impact the type of jobs people had, do you think?
Sure, it did. Most of your darkers, you saw your janitors uh, and porters at the train stations and airports. They were all the subservient, so to speak, jobs. You mostly saw those being filled by darker skinned people, and your maids, your domestic workers, cafeteria workers, things of that sort. They were mostly filled by darker skinned women. But of course, at the time, in real time, for me, I didn't even pay that any attention because of uh, the region that I grew up in. That just wasn't a thing. That wasn't a factor. It was if you could just get a job, you get a job. We had no, we just didn't have that mindset that you could get this kind of job because you were this color or that color. Even though it was happening throughout the country, it just wasn't a real focus where we grew up. We knew that there was discrimination, but we weren't just openly aware of it like it was happening in the South.
Exactly. Yeah, the South really is where colorism for me went full fledged. Like, had I stayed in California my entire upbringing, it's not that I didn't know I was black, as obviously I did, but it wasn't a constant reminder like it
Mm-hmm.
is in the South. Like in the South, you reminded every time you get looked at crazy that you black. You get reminded every time somebody cuts you off that you black. In
Mm-hmm.
California, you
No,
just don't get that. It's just not there. Like it's more of a rare occurrence versus
well, in
South. It's every
California,
day.
yeah, true, baby. And in California, we weren't made to feel ashamed that we were black.
Yeah, very true.
You know, that's the reason why I've been in the South. Well, I'm in the deep South now. And I had an experience just this past week. I went to a mattress store to purchase a new bed, and my salesperson was a white man, my age, as a matter of fact. As we had a little conversation, we are the same age. And just during the course of this sales transaction, all of a sudden, out of the blue, he asked me where was I from, because it's the way I interacted with him um, is probably different than what he's accustomed to, the way he's accustomed to interacting with black people that are from the South, and they know immediately that you're from somewhere else, because that's how we grew up. We grew up with a sense of pride. And I'm not saying that black people in the South don't have that, because they have it on another level, because they suffered through things that we didn't have to suffer through. So I applaud them to the utmost, because they bore the brunt of the civil rights movement. So I'm not trying to negate that in any way, but it's just an aura about what conditions you grew up under. And we didn't have to suffer a lot of what they suffered. We had it in a more subtle way
Very.
that we didn't even identify as discrimination at the time, but I do now.
When you say you do now, what gives an example of how you look back on it and know now?
Well, what I look back on is because I just recently re-entered college, and some of the studies that I've had to take have highlighted what I didn't recognize in real time as what it was. For one, redlining. I don't know who all might be familiar with the term redlining, but what it is a discriminatory practice in real estate, banking, and so forth, insurance, and those industries. I remember, I'm gonna give a real live example. I said earlier that when I started school, our neighborhoods were integrated and our schools were integrated. That's from elementary school all the way through, I'm going to say, because we called it junior high, they call it middle school now. But by the time we got to high school, there was the population in our schools was predominantly Black and Hispanic. We didn't see any more whites. We didn't see any more Asians. It was primarily Black and Hispanic. Well, I didn't know at the time what that was about. But in my studies, I learned that it was a practice, an illegal practice, but you can find ways around the law uh, to keep certain groups, ethnic groups, confined to one area of the city. They wouldn't sell you houses in certain areas. They wouldn't give you bank loans or mortgage loans if you lived in a certain area. That was to keep you confined. That's why we come up with communities like Watts and Compton and what they now call South Central. They weren't calling it that when I was growing up. But anywhere where there's a big congregation or of people of color, uh, that's how that came about, to keep them confined. So when I say it was more subtle, that's one way, but there were other ways as well. We dealt with police brutality. Of course, our minds were so indoctrinated that we as a people were troublemakers. That was a brainwashing. So whenever you saw Black people getting involved with the police, our minds automatically told us, because of the brainwashing, that they had done something wrong.
From the viewpoint of being in California, watching what was going on in the South, is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about watching what was going on, for instance, in the Watts riot,
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
because I was a teenager at that time. But we just that's one of the subtleties versus what was going on in the South. We could go anywhere we wanted to go to eat. We could go anywhere we wanted to shop. I didn't know that we couldn't buy a house anywhere at the time. But you know, the I'm trying to compare the difference in discrimination in California than in the South.
Okay.
They couldn't go to a lunch counter. They had to sit in lunch counters. They couldn't drink out the same water fountain. Oh, they couldn't use the same restrooms. They couldn't check in to certain hotels. We didn't go through that sort of thing, but we had discrimination just the same. It was just more subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How our like I said, how our schools ended up being primarily Hispanic and Black
Mm-hmm.
through a discriminatory practice called redlining. But
Mm-hmm.
we didn't know that was happening. I'm not even sure if our parents knew that's what was happening.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I learned about that in school too. And I mean, it's still a thing. It's just not. It's not an official thing where they're like you are denying you a mortgage per se. But like Mama said, they got little ways
Mm-hmm.
around it. Like, because even where I live, it wouldn't surprise me if we applied for this mortgage that it would have been all of a sudden not possible, or even just the most recent thing that's another racism towards Black people that's subtle is
Yeah.
appraisal when you're
It
trying
was
to
your name.
sell.
If your name was Shaniqua Jordan
Okay, I would
or
immediately get looked
Jamal
over.
Jordan.
Get looked over for jobs. I mean, Mom, you said that. That's the reason why you named me my name, because you
Yeah.
didn't want me to deal with the assumption of me being of lesser class, of being ghetto based on my name solely. I mean, even, my husband deals with that because
And
his name
and, and,
is so
and let's deal with that term ghetto, because I find that term very offensive.
and it is. And that's what they associate things that have. I'm like, that doesn't make
What
any
what what's
sense. Like,
wrong with what's wrong with being ghetto?
why does that seem like you're of
What,
lesser value because you
wait a minute, Danielle. What'd you say, mommy?
I said, what's wrong with being ghetto when you've set up a system that creates ghettos?
exactly.
So now you set the system up for us to, like I was saying about Watts, Compton, they're considered the ghetto. You set the system up, and then we're we don't understand the dynamics behind that. So we even use the term against ourselves that we're ghetto. I say again, what's wrong with being ghetto? Because for all intents and purposes, I was born and raised in the ghetto. But ghetto is a state of mind. It's not a location. Hello.
Okay, let me read it. Okay, Ace Butterfly is asking, wow, Miss Shirley, who and where did the indoctrinating come from? I think you answered that though. The indoctrinating of I guess I'm assuming that they're asking being black as being a troublemaker, but I think you kind of alluded to that.
Look, can I give you an example?
Yeah, Mom,
Let's
go
let's
ahead.
let's talk about the Black Panthers up in Oakland, Northern California. Let's talk about Malcolm X on the East Coast. Let's talk about, I just watched this documentary the other night about Josephine Baker. Once she got involved in the civil rights movement. Anytime any of us got involved in anything that's promoting equal rights, we were termed troublemakers or communists, because back then communist meant you was an automatic enemy of this country. And you had what's his name, Hoover, the head of the FBI at the time.
J. Edgar Hoover, yeah.
If he put that, if he stamped you with that, and then of course we didn't have the social media like we have now. We just had television, 3 basic stations, and you got your news from those stations. You got your propaganda from those stations. That's what we had. So it was easy to get indoctrinated to that. Every time you would see someone black being named as a communist, that was automatic red flag. Oh, they're troublemakers. So that was a mindset. We were indoctrinated. Now the Black Panthers, they wanted to make it seem like anytime they called them militants, anytime any group of blacks or even individuals for that matter spoke up in defense of black people and their civil rights, they turned Martin Luther King a communist, because they were going against the system the way that they wanted this system to be and the way the system really is. There's just been some movements that ended up with some laws being passed, but laws don't change hearts.
Grow them, mommy. Grow them.
Well, that's just the truth. And y'all, I gotta go.
Okay, one more thing real quick before you go, mommy. Um, do you think, since we're talking about colorism, do you think what you've seen now over the past 30, 40 years, that there is such a thing as light skin privilege?
Uh, I think it's more so among us than it is.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's what
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
yeah, among us because of ignorance. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm so up on it, because I just started learning some things that I wasn't aware of with just within the last 4 years myself. Um, but I just attribute it to our own ignorance of our own history. We need to learn more about our own history, and then we would be more understanding, and we as a people wouldn't stand for all this stuff that we have been that we have bought into
Against
against
ourselves.
ourselves.
And before you go, last thing, because you said know our history. And my mother, you what school you attend, Mommy? Will you share that with them?
I attend Fayetteville State University. It's a HBCU, and I'm majoring in English, and my minor is Africana Studies, only because they were not offering Africana Studies as a major. I find out now that they're working on that. I saw a news clip just this morning on our local news that, oh gosh, what's the name of the university? It's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, that they have now got a program that offers Africana Studies as a major. It's not a HBCU, but it is a 4-year university. And they have opened up this study as a major. They showed clips of the classroom and the students in the classroom, and guess what?
They're all white.
All white.
That listen, y'all need to hear this because when I attended the University of Oklahoma and the classes that I took, African American studies. Even then, we're talking about late 80s and 90s. The majority of the people that were in our class learning about our history were not us, and they were answering the questions. And it goes to the point too. Before you go, Mommy, there have been a lot of people, and I think Danielle and I even had a little discord about it. The need for African American History Month to celebrate that. The one of the reasons, because some people say, well, it should be year round. It should be year round, but it's not year round. And what they do teach is not factual. I'll give you an example. I brought up right now Dr. Charles Drew. Dr. Charles Drew is the pioneer who is considered the father of the blood bank. I have read several accounts over the years that he was allowed into a white hospital. Okay, he was, but he was not allowed the blood transfusion that he created. But then there are some accounts in history that has been over the past 10, 15 years. They've even convoluted that to assert that he was giving life-saving procedures, but he succumbed. So that is why it is necessary for Black History Month, because they're not they're not going to give us the truth. Go ahead,
No,
Mom.
they're not. And that goes to that critical
Race
race
theory.
theory situation, that the history that you created, you're ashamed of and you don't want it taught. But the Bible says that you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Um, we as a people need to get that, because we can't just continue to stick our head, because our history is dark. It's very dark, but we didn't create it. We didn't create it. So we don't have anything to be ashamed of. And we should be, all of us, promoting, because they gave us the shortest month in the calendar to begin with, February. And you're only going to get snippets of our history in that period of time. We need to take it upon ourselves to, if you can't go back to school, everybody's not able to do that. Everybody's life is different. They have different other responsibilities and priorities, and may not be able to just spend the time in school that I can spend. I'm retired, so my motivation is different for being back in school than a younger person's would be. But you can go to the library, and those of you that, which is most of you, that are computer literate or connected socially on the different media streams, you can watch documentaries. You can do all sorts of things to learn about who you are, who we are, and not be ashamed of it. We have nothing to be ashamed of. Absolutely nothing. We are brilliant people, and we are self-reliant people, uh, if we're let alone to do that. So just I would just encourage each one of you that's listening or viewing or whatever to take some time, if not for yourself, for your children, because we need to know the truth. And it doesn't make us look as bad as it makes the oppressor look. And that's why they're trying to fight us knowing the truth. But this country is not going to go any further than it has. It keeps repeating the same stuff in different ways because they keep wanting to suppress the truth. And the truth is not going to continuously allow that type of suppression. But we have to get involved with knowing for ourselves what our history is about. And we can hold our heads up a little bit higher and not be ashamed of who we are, because what was done to us, not by us.
M. Mills talked about when you said the ghetto, the so-called ghetto is where we were safe and protected growing up.
Absolutely. The real communities, real
Yeah.
communities. But we sought after what,
Go ahead and speak on it, mommy.
well, we just wanted to be like them. So we first saw we just kind of abandoned our own communities because they said, well, now we can go over there, now we can do that. So I mean, that's cool, but it broke up our community, our sense of community, where we looked out for one another, and we made sure our schools were solid, those type of things. That it just kind of just blew apart the sense of community.
And in that too, and that's another reason I wanted to talk about colorism. And particularly, I did a show the other day, and I know you got to go, mommy, about taking back the black female image, because we are when I talk about women, we are I have a history, a dignified history of being ladies, sophisticated, and we're not even talking about education. We're
No.
talking about how we presented ourselves to the world. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we did not allow ourselves to play into the stereotypes that they had created for us, and now we have. That is why you have some of these now caricatures of us as Black women. And regrettably, kind of like what mommy said, the caricatures that we're seeing are of dark skinned women acting in ways that are not commensurate with how we are, our people, our women.
Mm-mm.
So just like they had the caricatures of the big lips, the bulging eyes, the watermelon, now you have the caricature of the sapphire or the ratchet female with the lashes, the loud mouth, cussing out, nails. That is the caricature. And it's not just black, dark skinned women that are doing it, but that is the
No,
image that's being portrayed
no.
again. So we got to take it back.
Pride.
And it's not about how much money you have, because y'all know I didn't grow up with money, but my mother showed us how to be, be dignified in our how we presented ourselves to the world. And that has nothing to do with colorism. But what we must do, women and men, we should stop. We cannot talk about the prejudice of others when we are prejudiced
No.
against our own selves. Mommy, any last words before you go?
No, because it won't. If I start, it won't be the last word. So I've got to go. I've got a lot I've got to get done this weekend, and but I enjoyed myself, and I just hope my words fall on some listening ears. It's hard to just get everything that's on your heart across in a few minutes, but I'm very sincere when I say we need to learn who we are. And who we are didn't start in America. It didn't. but it's something you have to put forth the effort to do. I believe you'll get addicted to it once you start because you need to know. We just need to know who we are.
Okay, I know I keep saying this, but in the Willie Lynch letter, they talked about if you want to keep something from a Black person, put it in a book. Okay, here's the impetus. Here's the importance of that, and it's become different over the years. The reason he said that is because to put it in a book, we would be lynched for trying to read. So if any information that wanted to be put out, they said put it in a book because they knew Black people were afraid to be caught reading.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's taken on a whole new meaning. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to keep something from a Black person, put in a book. Why? Is because even though we can read, we won't read.
Well, you can even get around that now. You don't have to read. You can get YouTube, documentaries,
Audiobooks.
audiobooks. Uh, what's his name? Gates.
Oh,
Dr. Gates.
Dr. Howard, yeah, Gates, yeah, I forget his name, but Dr. Gates, yes.
Yeah, look him up. Get some of his documentaries, and just develop a thirst for learning about yourself. It has to be developed because it's been squashed, but we can revive it.
Ace Butterfly has said, "Thank you, Miss Shirley. We need you to come back. This was a teaser." He said,
Wow.
and then Uncle Stu said, "Miss Shirley, we love you and thank you very much for your time, love, and education."
Oh, well, to God be the glory.
Yes,
And I wish the
uh,
same for all of you.
yes.
Got to go.
Same here.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna drop them off and I'm gonna cover a few more things with these. Bye, mommy. Bye, Danielle.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Love you.
Love you.
Love you too. Wow, this has been great. A few more things, and I'm going to go ahead and go myself. But absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the things we talked about, even in the history books of our school systems. Okay, I remember when my daughter was in school, when she was in high school in Virginia. They were teaching something, and I can't exactly remember, but I remember she came home and she was upset because they tried one of the history books talked about that slavery. They instead of saying slavery, they talk about migration, and they made it as it the way it was presented as if the people had a choice. I was up at the school board. I was up at the school board. What? Wait a minute, because they didn't want to use the word slavery, so they said, they migrated. Hmm. Yeah. So absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But back to the colorism thing too. We didn't get into it because for the sake of time. But one of the reasons I want to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more again because Danielle talked about it. We have different colors in our own family. And I will say, my nephew, the one you've seen on the horn, I'll share this with you really quickly. I remember when he was a baby. Let's see. Okay, here it is. When he was a baby, let me pull it right here. This is him right here, the blue eyes. And this is him and Danielle, and my grandfather. I remember when because he was so fair skinned, and my sister is my color. A lot of times it's kind of like with Meghan Markle, her mom. They thought my sister was his babysitter. Okay. And they would often talk about how beautiful he was, you know, even our people, how beautiful he was because he was so fair skinned, had those blue eyes. Yeah. And even question whether or not his parents were his parents because they were, substantially darker than he was. Okay. And then, especially when you see him with my grandfather's in the middle. You see in the middle picture is a very dark skinned man, but handsome, straight up, no chaser. And see the fact that I said, but that's the problem. He was a handsome man, period. How many of us have heard the phrase, you are so cute to be dark? You're handsome to be dark. See, we've done it to ourselves, even subconsciously. Yeah, subconsciously. So we have to do our research and really learn how we got here. Not to stay here, but to have appreciation, because here's the thing, I want to show this to you really quickly as well, which is really upsetting to me, but it's part of our history. And that's why I get a little bit upset when I hear people talk about they don't think that we need to do Black history or have a Black History Month. And like my mother said, it largely out of ignorance, but we can't remain there. Okay. We can't remain there. Yes. Yeah. And here's the thing. I got to go ahead and go there. My mother talked about, we have an uncle in our family, looked just like my nephew, had very straight hair, green eyes, very fair skin, is my grandfather's brother. Actually, he was the oldest. Uncle Bud was the oldest. None of us in our family ever talked about the fact that, because we were kids, we didn't recognize or understand the correlation. But my grandfather was one of like 11. Uncle Bud was the oldest, and he was the first, and he was the fairest of them all. My Uncle Bud was born in the 1800s. My grandfather's mother, my great grandmother, is just as dark as my grandfather you saw. So it wasn't until I became an adult, and I mean in the last 10, 15 years, that I really thought about it. I'm like, wait a minute. Uncle Bud he is a product of the oppressor taking what he wanted from my great grandmother. Okay? That's how he became the color he was. Nobody in the family ever talked about it. It didn't even register to me until I was like in my well grown. So they never treated him any different, any better, but the world did. Because why? He was light, bright, damn near white. Okay, let's keep it 1,000, shall we? That's why. Let's talk about, but even still, even with that, I got to go ahead and grow y'all to Dr. Charles Drew. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I got to read some stuff to you. I got to read some stuff to you because this is very important. Very important. And and I'm still kind of feeling some type of way about it, as y'all say. Listen to this. Charles Richard Drew, father of the blood bank. Major significant achievements. Discovered a method for long-term blood plasma. Y'all know people give plasma, and check this out. Since we're in the time of COVID, some people have received life-saving blood plasma to even combat COVID. Dr. Charles Drew is the pioneer of that. How many of you knew that? I'll wait. I'll wait. How many of you knew this? Okay. Let's keep going. Dr. Charles Drew broke barriers in a racially divided America to become one of the most important scientists of the 20th century. His pioneering research and systematic developments in the use and preservation of blood plasma during World War II not only saved thousands of lives, but innovated the nation's blood banking process and standardized procedures for long-term blood preservation and storage techniques, adapted by the American Red Cross. Yes, he looks biracial. Again, born in 1904. My grandfather was born in 1910. Uncle Bub was born in the 1800s. Okay. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of the stuff here, but I really want to point out some very important pieces here. Drew's interest in transfusion medicine began during his internship and surgical residency at Montreal Hospital, working with bacteriology. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Professor John Beatty on ways to treat shock with fluid replacement. Drew aspired to continue training in transfusion therapy at the Mayo Clinic, but racial prejudices at major American medical centers barred Black scholars from their practices. He would instead join the faculty at Howard University School College of Medicine, starting as a pathology instructor and then progressing to surgical instructor and chief surgical resident at Freedman's Hospital. Let's see here. I bet you some wanted to get. Listen, it's happened. It's happened. What is plasma? Plasma is a clear yellow liquid containing various proteins and electrolytes that carries blood cells and other substances through the body. It can be used as a blood substitute to help replace fluids and treat shock. We are in the midst of that right now. My coworker and friend, her daughter had COVID. She was in the hospital for months. Her mother flew to where she was to give plasma to get her daughter well. Okay? So we know about plasma. We know about it. Check this out. The program became a model for the Red Cross pilot program to mass produce dried plasma in New York in February, Black History Month, okay, 1941, with Drew as assistant director and later the National Blood Donor Service. Among his innovations were blood mobiles. How many know about blood mobiles that would go and to donate blood? Okay. Mobile blood donation trucks with refrigerations. The work sealed his reputation as a pioneer and earned him the title Father of the Blood Bank. Peep game. Ironically, the Red Cross excluded African Americans from donating blood, making Drew himself ineligible to participate in the very program he established. That policy was later modified to accept donations from Blacks. However, the institution upheld racial segregation of blood, which throughout the war Drew openly criticized as unscientific and insulting to African Americans. Y'all need to quit playing. And peep game on this. Let's see. Charles Drew died tragically in North Carolina on April 1st, 1950, after falling asleep while driving to a conference. He was given a blood transfusion at an all-white hospital. I want you to research that. Because, see, that's what I'm talking about here. Because I've done history myself, and there are many accounts that one of the reasons that Dr. Drew died is because when they took him to one hospital, a white hospital, they didn't accept him at the hospital. Then they had to find another hospital where poor whites went to be treated, but still did not allow him to get blood because they did not want him to get white blood. You need to quit playing. So when people say there's no need for Black history, well, listen, we cannot allow or expect mainstream to teach us everything we need to know. No, they don't do it for any other ethnic group. Why would we expect them to do it for us? Okay. But I am highly offended when people say, particularly our people, say that there's no need for it because we've already talked. Some of y'all don't even get a hold of the history during Black History Month. So you damn sure ain't gonna pay attention to it throughout the year. So just quit playing. And like my mother said, if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your children. Because I already talked about my granddaughter already got books started. Uh-huh. Already got books started. And there's no excuse for you to have kids instead of sitting down watching these music videos with your kids. Why don't you sit down and watch a documentary, learn something with them? Okay, how about that? Okay, would Dr. Drew have had access to education? You know what? I don't know if he's biracial. We're assuming that he is. I'm assuming that he is. But we don't know because, again, I don't have a picture of my grandmother, but my grandmother wasn't biracial, but she was full blood Cherokee Indian. So I don't know his background. It's probably in here, but I don't know. But again, it does beg the question if certain opportunities were afforded to him because he was of a lighter hue. But even then, it wasn't enough to give him the life-saving measures that hit for him to benefit from the life-saving measures that he established. I need y'all to quit playing with me today. I need y'all to get growed real. But like my mother said, we must stop allowing ourselves to be continually indoctrinated to the caricatures of who we are. I'm speaking for the women right now. It's funny because one of my best friends is darker skin. Hey, beautiful, always. I mean, she pulled harder than me growing up. Gorgeous. But we never even considered, like my mom said, you're beautiful to be dark. She was just beautiful, period. Period. And we have to stop allowing ourselves to, buy into the caricatures. But ladies, hear me. Quit feeding into it yourselves. I know some of you don't know what it looks like because, again, it's kind of gone by the wayside over the years, but we are a very dignified people. Dignified people. We need to find that again. And you heard my mother say, and I knew what she meant. When the guy in the furniture store said, you're not, asked if she was from around where she was from. I got that a lot. One of various places that I was stationed. I knew what they meant. It's offensive, but I knew what they meant. But regrettably, people will take the caricatures and assume that is who we are. They're going to do it without us helping. Okay? So how about let's not help? Men, quit, even if you think it. Please quit saying I don't date dark-skinned women. Please, even if you think it, please quit saying it. Because if you say it, it gives others license to say it as well. And bad conduct is bad conduct no matter what shade of black you are or what shade you are, period. Stop helping them. But women, we have to stop helping them too. Okay? We didn't cover everything I wanted to cover, but when my mom was on, because I've been trying to get my mom, oh, they're going to cancel me? Well, if they do, Fortunately, I'm retired like my mom, so I have to start something else. Maybe I started on my, I don't know, under another, me and my husband. But again, I'm trying to grow y'all. I'm trying to grow myself. We need to stop helping them. You know, the reason, like I said, I let my mom take the lead because I've been trying to get her on since July. so whatever time I could get, I was gonna let her roll because I mean, there's so much knowledge there, so much experience there, and thank you for the warm welcome that you all gave her, and hopefully she'll come back again. Again, shout out to Ace Butterfly. We didn't dig in as much as I want to dig in, but again, I kind of deferred to my mom. But thank you for the topic. Yeah, we need to, we need to do a part two. We do. And in these YouTube streets, there's always going to be something else to add to give us something to talk about. That's for sure. But listen, even though I didn't get a chance to get into everything that I want to get into, I did put the links to in the description about Black inventors. You know, did you know a Black person invented the street light, the refrigeration system that's in the that we use for refrigerator? Did you know that? Did you know that even though Thomas Edison gets the credit for the light bulb, but a Black man created the filament for the light bulb? You need to quit playing with me. That's in the description also. And for you youngins who want to try to grow me, and grow my, not just me, period, but specifically rather talk about, Black History Month is a joke. Okay, because you make it one. Because there are some who don't even know why it was created. You know what? I'm gonna grow you to this real quick, and this is gonna be my outro. Um, Pioneers. We come from a long line of pioneers, and you didn't even know you looking at one, did you? Did you? I'm about to help you out. I'm about to help you out. And here's the thing, and many people, myself included, when we sought out to do what we were doing, it wasn't because we were trying to be a pioneer. We were just trying to make a difference, to bring pride to our people. That's what we were trying to do. And this is no different. I'm going to share this with you. Let's see here. Do you see your Annie to the right? Okay. That's also me to the left. I'm in the middle. But that's during my time as an OU Sooner. Why the picture on the right is so important. You see that it says, well, you can't see it says class of 92, but you see that I'm wearing a kente cloth. That was the first Black graduation celebration at the University of Oklahoma in the year of 1992. Why that is important. Like my mom talked about growing up in Los Angeles, we lived in Los Angeles until my mother moved us to Oklahoma in the late 70s. Well, during one of my summer trips to California, I think it was 1991, I went to the UCLA's Black graduation. And I saw it was a convocation ceremony for the African American students on UCLA's campus because it was a primarily white institution, not like a HBCU, but they came together. And what that was, it was a convocation ceremony the day before the commencement ceremony for the African American students on the campus of UCLA to have an opportunity to walk across the stage and to hear their name called. And also it, had, African American history, infused in it. I was so inspired by that. I was so inspired by the pride because, like me, many of those that were walking across the stage at UCLA were first generation college graduates, and I was going to be the same. I wanted to bring that to the University of Oklahoma. So having just seen that one program, that one summer, I had in my mind, I'm going to bring that to OU. Nobody else at OU had ever seen it because it wasn't mainstream. A lot of schools weren't doing it. I went to the Black Student Association and I worked with them and I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I saw. I want to bring that to the University of Oklahoma. I came up a lot of, there was a core group of students who agreed and wanted to bring that program to the University of Oklahoma. And the reason being, it wasn't about separating ourselves. It was about doing it in conjunction with the school commencement. And the reason why it was important for us is because many of us, like I said, were first generation college students and would be first generation college graduates. The graduation ceremony was to be set in the football stadium of OU. Well, most of us whose families were going to attend would not even be able to see us down on the football field because we're talking about thousands of students. And there were maybe a total of 1,000 Black students on the university's campus at that time. So we went about to prepare for this program, to get guest speakers. I think our guest speaker may have been Dr. Cornel West. I have to go back and research it. Dr. Cornel West. We came up, primarily me, came up with against a lot of opposition because they said the Black students were starting to separate themselves from the University of Oklahoma, trying to separate themselves from OU, and we weren't. I did many interviews, and many of the people who are on the committee with me had many conversations, many interviews, many of conferences with department heads, school administrators to try to say, we're not trying to separate ourselves. This is why we are doing it. And what motivated me to do it primarily is not because it was just a good idea. My grandfather at the time, I think, was in his 80s, and he was in a wheelchair. And I knew that my grandfather was not going to be able to traverse the ramp and all that kind of stuff to be able to see his grandchild way down on the football field. That was my motivation. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I wasn't trying to pioneer anything, but I knew just as my family would benefit, my other fellow graduates, their families would benefit too. So after all the controversy, the first graduation celebration was held in May of 1992. A few years later, I went back to the university after I left, and after that, every ethnic and racial group on the university's campus had their own convocation ceremony the night before the regular commencement. So out of all the opposition we faced, I faced every other group: Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans. All of them had their own program. Why? Because we were the trailblazers. I was the visionary who brought it to the University of Oklahoma, not because I wanted to be a trailblazer, but I felt that it was needed for us to come together and to celebrate ourselves, to celebrate the accomplishments that we had made, not only for us, but for our families. And I want you to know, they still continue that celebration the day before the commencement to this day at the University of Oklahoma. And it has only gotten better. So I'm proud. You understand me? And I don't know everything I need to know about my history, but I'm interested in learning. And again, like these trailblazers, that's not why they did it. They saw a need. They sought to fill it. They saw an injustice. They sought to right it. For those who say they don't think that Black history is necessary, hey, kick rocks. I know that wasn't classy, but I disagree. I disagree. So thank you for sharing this time with me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you again for welcoming my mom and my fruit. Yes, reading is fundamental. And like my mom said, there's no excuse now. You got videos, audiobooks, everything. So again, that even though I didn't get a chance to acknowledge all of them, thank you for the super chats, the super stickers. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for your questions. And again, Ace Butterfly, shout out. Thank you for that. Please, if you have any other suggestions of things that you want me to comment on to research, I want to grow us together. You know, it ain't going, ooh, you said, I saw, wait a minute. Ooh, you gave me some here. Okay. You know what? We were just talking about that because that's a real thing. This would be the color of a paper bag. See, y'all youngins don't know nothing about a paper bag because see, y'all, do recycling plastic and all this kind of stuff. But we had actual paper bags that we would take our lunch in, and they would actually compare your skin to a paper bag to see if you were darker than the paper bag. It's real. Mm-hmm. It's real. It's real. Yes. So again, thank y'all so much. I appreciate it for y'all coming through. It was fun. And until I'm going to show y'all my new outro that Micki-Redd Creates did for me. So thanks so much. And y'all have a blessed, safe weekend. And we will see you next week.